All right. Whoa. It is working just right. There we go. All right. We're glad everyone could be here tonight. Glad you can make it in. We're going to continue our study of Beyond the Exile. We had a good lesson last week. I hope you were here for that, talking about the synagogue. Brother Kirk Brothers did an excellent job delivering that lesson for us. If you missed it, it is still on our YouTube page, Facebook page, live stream page. I can get it to you in just about any format. So just however you want it. We'd love for you to watch that class if you missed it. It was a great class where we were able to get a lot of information on the synagogue. It's really kind of an unknown, at least, he gave off a lot of options of when the synagogue worship began and how that, began to develop into the way that it was. One of the possibilities that was mentioned was that it happened when they were in exile, or maybe at least just after exile. So those are a couple of the options that were listed. And so we wanted that to include that in our Beyond the Exile class, just to give us a possibility and to give us a lot of good information. And really, he did a very good job of taking that all the way into the life of Christ, into the life of the apostles and others as they taught and as they helped spread the word. The synagogue played a critical role in that and gave a good focal point for the gospel to start from and then go from that point on into various cities and communities. In our study of Beyond the Exile, though, when we were doing the book of Ezra, we went from Ezra chapter 1 all the way through Ezra chapter 5, leaving off there in verse 1. And then we took a couple of weeks to cover the prophets of Haggai and Zechariah. I covered the book of Haggai. Brother Gary covered the book of Zechariah. And those were two prophets that you're going to see there in the first verse of Ezra chapter 5 and verse 1. And these two prophets came and they spoke for a specific reason. Turning to Ezra chapter 5, looking there in verse 1, it says, "Then the prophet Haggai and Zechariah the son of Iddo, prophets, prophesied to the Jews who were in Judah and Jerusalem in the name of the God of Israel, who was over them. So Zerubbabel, the son of Shealtiel, and Jeshua, the son of Jozadak, rose up and began to build the house of God, which is in Jerusalem, and the prophets of God were with them, helping them." And so you see here that within these first few verses that you're going to see these two prophets in action. And so in the book of Ezra, you have a limited amount of information of what the prophets actually do, but you go over to Haggai and Zechariah and you see a more complete message of what these prophets came to say, what message they were there to deliver, and how the people responded to that message. And so it's really interesting to read those books. If you haven't done so, take time to go back and read the book of Haggai and Zechariah in their entirety. It won't take too long, but they're really interesting to read. Now notice, these two prophets, when we're putting them on our timeline, and our timeline is especially going to be important tonight, because as we get into about chapter 7, we're going to make a time jump. And so we need to make sure we kind of lay our timeline down a little bit. And so these two prophets, approximately 520, 519 BC is the approximate time period at which Haggai and Zechariah came to deliver their message to the people. Now, just as a recap, why were they coming to deliver a message? Because the people had stopped building. They had stopped working for the Lord. They had stopped doing what they had been commanded to do in building the temple of the Lord. And so, obviously, Haggai and Zechariah came from God to deliver that message, to return to work, and to focus once again on the important things, which were the things of God. Now, in this time period, you're going to have a governor, Tetatne, the governor of the region beyond the river, and a companion of Shethar Boznai. I probably butchered the name, but that's okay. And you see there in verses 3 through 5 that them and their companions came to them and spoke thus to them, who commanded you to build this temple and finish this wall. Then accordingly, we told them by the names of the men who were constructing this building. But the eye of their God was upon the elders of the Jews, so that they could not make them cease till a report could go to Darius. Then a written answer was returned concerning this matter. Here is the governor, and here is his companions, and they are wanting to know, who gave you authority? Who gave you authority to begin building again? Who gave you authority to be doing these sorts of things? They were curious and wanted to know, and the way I kind of read it, and maybe I'm reading into it, they were complaining a little bit. Who gave you the authority to do these things? That they really wanted to know that. And so, to Tatnai, the governor, he's going to compose a letter. He's going to make sure that these guys are telling him the truth and what the report that they are giving is accurate. And so, we see as we start there in verses 6 through 17, really we're going to pick the reading up in verse 7, that he's going to send a letter to Darius, and we're going to see what this letter says. It says, "To Darius the king, all peace. Let it be known to you, the king, that we went into the province of Judea, to the temple of the great God, which is being built with heavy stones and timber, is being laid in the walls. And this work goes on diligently and prospers in their hands. Then we asked those elders and spoke thus to them, who commanded you to build this temple and to finish these walls? We also asked them their names to inform you that we might write the names of the men who were chief among them. And thus they returned us an answer saying, we are the servants of God of heaven, of earth, and we are rebuilding the temple that was built many years ago, which a great king of Israel built and completed. But because our fathers provoked the God of heaven to wrath, he gave them into the hand of Nebuchadnezzar, king of Babylon, the Chaldean, who destroyed the temple and carried the people away to Babylon. However, in the first year of Cyrus, king of Babylon, King Cyrus issued a decree to build this house of God. Also the gold and the silver articles of the house of God, which Nebuchadnezzar had taken from the temple that was in Jerusalem and carried into the temple of Babylon. Those King Cyrus took from the temple of Babylon, and they were given to one named Sheshbazzar, whom he had made governor. And he said to him, take these articles, go, carry them to the temple site that is in Jerusalem, and let the house of God be rebuilt on its former site. Then the same Sheshbazzar came and laid the foundation of the house of God, which is in Jerusalem. But from that time until now, it has been under construction, and it is not finished. Now therefore, if it seems good to the king, let a search be made in the king's treasure house, which is there in Babylon, whether it is so that a decree was issued by King Cyrus to build this house of God at Jerusalem, and let the king send us his pleasure concerning this matter. So here you're going to see the governor's going to write a letter. He's going to write it back to Darius to see if the things they were being told about the rebuilding of this temple were true and accurate. And so here you have the children of Israel here with Zerubbabel and others. They're working. Zerubbabel, Jeshua, these guys are back to work. The prophet's message from the Lord, or the Lord's message from the prophets, has inspired them, has encouraged them, has got them back to work, and yet they're facing some opposition. They're facing at least a serious questioning of why are you working? So this letter is sent. Now, all the while this letter is sent, it doesn't stop them from working this time. In previous years and days gone by, a letter like this might have stopped them. But in this case, they're working. They're going to continue to work because they know that they are serving the Almighty God, and they're going to continue this work. And we're going to see the fruit of that coming up here in chapter 6. So when we come to chapter 6 and Ezra, what we find is Darius the king, he is going to give his reply. Now once again, these are some lengthy readings that we have in here, but you're going to see the decree that he is going to give. And so first, let's say this. Darius does that search that he's asked to do. He searches in the treasury. He searches for, the written record of King Cyrus, of his declaration for these people to go back, and what artifacts they were taking with them, and who their leaders were. It mentions specifically the name Sheshbazzar. That is who they gave those items to, who they were given to, and who was sent back with them to rebuild. And so Darius does this search, and he finds Cyrus' decree, and he is going to allow that work to continue. We're going to see that coming here in verses 8 through 12. It says, moreover, I issue a decree as to what you shall do for the elders of these Jews for the building of this house of God. Let the costs be paid at the king's expense from taxes on the region beyond the river. That is to be given immediately to these men so that they are not hindered. And whatever they need, young bulls, rams, lambs for the burnt offerings of the God of heaven, wheat, salt, wine, and oil, according to the request of the priests who are in Jerusalem, let it be given them day by day without fail, that they may offer sacrifices of sweet aroma to the God of heaven, and pray for the life of the king and his sons. Also I issue a decree that whoever alters this edict, let a timber be pulled from his house and erected, and let him be hanged on it, and let his house be made a refuse heap because of this. And may the God who causes his name to dwell there destroy any king or people who put their hand to alter it, or to destroy this house of God, which is in Jerusalem. I, Darius, issue a decree, let it be done diligently. So finally, since the days of Cyrus, they have this leader who is on the same track that Cyrus was. What did he want? They wanted the God of heaven to be appeased. They wanted the God of heaven to be on their side. And so here they are, and Cyrus and Darius, both of them, they wanted to do whatever they could to promote this rebuilding, to get the temple back going the way it should, to get the people of Israel worshiping the way they should. Why? He says it within this. He wanted himself, he wanted his sons, he wanted his kingdom to be blessed because of this. And so he basically has the attitude, why not? This is going to be great. So he instructs them. Cyrus issued a decree. This is law. This is what is true. Darius is following that law. He's following the edict that had already been issued. And so therefore he is going to reenact the previous judgment. He's going to reenact that judgment, and he is going to give them anything that they need. He's going to supply them with what they need to supply to what it seems like a just great amount of supplies and grandeur. He even is going to lay down a law that says if anybody tries to distract, tries to destroy, tries to stop this work, that they can be guilty to the point of even their death. And that is a serious, serious judgment that he is laying down here in his decree here. And we're going to see just, how great this is going to encourage these people to get back to work. Yes, sir, Mr. Bob. Right. Correct. Mm-hmm. Right. Yes, Mr. Bob was saying that the location where they kept these decrees was in a specific city and a specific high structure to where it would keep these documents safe, it would keep them preserved, and where they were able to find these kind of documents. This nation had a very strong history of in their laws and in their customs and keeping up with their mandates that were made. They put a lot of importance on that. And Darius was getting back to that heritage, was getting back to that kind of law that was part of their culture. And so we see here that as these people, as they were going to obviously get back this letter, that obviously they've been working. They've been working the entire time that the letters had gone to Darius, and even before the letter had gotten a response. And so we see there in verses 14 to 15, so the elders of the Jews built and they prospered through the prophesying of Haggai, the prophet of Zechariah, the son of Iddo, and they built and finished it according to the commandment of God of Israel and according to the command of Cyrus, Darius, and Artaxerxes, king of Persia. Now the temple was finished on the 3rd day of the month of Adar, which was in the 6th year of the reign of King Darius. Now, I find this interesting. Here, what we see at this face value is they listened to the prophets, they did what God said, they got back to building, and they were able to prosper and to finish this. But notice something that's mentioned in here. It mentions Artaxerxes. Okay, so Artaxerxes is mentioned here in this timeline. Now notice this, Artaxerxes is not reigning yet. He's not here. He's not the leader right now. Darius is the leader right now when this, as far as happening. But who's doing the writing? Well, you have Ezra, who's going to reign, who's going to live under the time of Artaxerxes, who is going to come later on in chapter 7. And so here you have a man that's writing after the fact, and he includes a leader who is influential as far as in the total project of the city and the total project of the restoration of the Jewish people, maybe not in direct effect to the temple itself. And so it's just kind of interesting to see Artaxerxes being mentioned here within that. But you see, the temple was finished on the 3rd day of the month of Adar, which is the 6th year of the king of Darius, which puts approximately the completion of the temple around 516 BC. That's a kind of approximate date when the temple was completed. Then the children of Israel, this is picking up, children of Israel and the priests and the Levites and the rest of the descendants of captivity celebrated the dedication of this house of God with joy, and they offered sacrifices at the dedication of this house of God, 100 bulls, 200 rams, 400 lambs, and as a sin offering for all the Israel, 12 male goats, according to the number of the tribes of Israel. They assigned the priests to their divisions and the Levites to their divisions over the sacrifice of God in Jerusalem, as it is written in the book of Moses. And so basically, they got back to a lot of their customs and a lot of their ways, offering the appropriate sacrifices, offering those sin offerings, giving the jobs out that were needing to be given, and getting themselves back to the work of the law, the work of the temple, and the work of the Jewish people. And so one of the important sacrifices that you're going to see them then celebrate in and honor God through is going to be the Feast of Unleavened Bread and the Passover. Now, this feast was, dates back to the time of their Egyptian captivity and the 10 plagues and the Passover that came up over Egypt and the children of Israel, where the Israelites were spared if they were obedient to the Lord, but the Egyptians lost the death of the firstborn in those households. And so they're going to see this feast that's going to be put in place for that. The Jewish people were to follow. It was a very important feast day, feast week for them. The Feast of Unleavened Bread would last those 7 days. So we pick up here in verse 19 through 22. And it says, "And the descendants of captivity kept the Passover on the 14th day of the first month. For the priests and the Levites had purified themselves. All of them were ritually clean. And they slaughtered the Passover lambs for all the descendants of captivity, for their brethren the priests and themselves. Then the children of Israel who had returned from captivity ate together with all who had separated themselves from the filth of the nations of the land, in order to seek the Lord God of Israel. And they kept the feast of the unleavened bread 7 days with joy, for the Lord made them joyful, and turned the heart of the king of Assyria toward them, to strengthen their hands in the work of the house of God, the God of Israel." And so this is just really important for us to note that now the temple is completed. They have ceremonially cleansed themselves. The priests are ready to serve in their roles. They're going to honor these feast days as was appropriate and as was commanded to them. They're really starting to get back to the way the Jewish people were supposed to be living and supposed to be doing. Now, as we conclude chapter 6, we're getting ready to jump into chapter 7, and that is a literal jump in a timeline. Because what we're going to do is we're going to leave this time period of Darius and of time period prior to Ezra, and now we're going to get into the really Ezra himself and his coming to Jerusalem by the decree or by the allowance of Artaxerxes. Now, Artaxerxes, we see there in Ezra chapter 7 and verse 1, says, "Now after these things, in the reign of Artaxerxes, king of Persia, Ezra the son of Sariah, the son of Azariah, the son of Hilkiah, the son of Shallum, the son of Zadok, the son of Ahitub, the son of Amariah, the son of Azariah, the son of Marioth, the son of Zechariah, the son of Uzi, the son of Buki, the son of Abusha, I cannot pronounce his name, Abushua, the son of Phinehas, the son of Eleazar, the son of Aaron, the chief priest." I did that on purpose because I wanted to get down to who he was related to. We get down to this latter part of the list, and what do we see? We see that Phinehas, Eleazar, Aaron, the chief priest. Ezra comes from an incredible family. He comes from a great group of men. Granted, we can't say they were perfect, they weren't, but at least going back to Aaron, he's coming from a very important family. This is in the time of Artaxerxes. Now, Artaxerxes is going to rule between 465 to 423, 424-ish time period. So that's obviously, if you go to 465, this is about 50-ish years, somewhere in that ballpark, somewhere in that from the time of 516 over into here. And so we've really jumped, 5 decades into the future. Just remember, BC continues to count down towards the time of Christ. And so here we're jumping 50 years into the future. Here is Ezra coming. He's going to come to Jerusalem in the 7th year of Artaxerxes. We go on down to Ezra chapter 7, going down to verse 9, and we're going to see here, and it says, "On the first day of the first month, he began his journey from Babylon, and on the first day of the 5th month, he came to Jerusalem according to the good hand of his God upon him." And so we see about approximately a 4-month journey here. It's going to take him to get from Babylon to Jerusalem. It's not a short walk. It's not a short trip. It is actually very dangerous. We're going to get into a little bit of that danger as we continue to go forward in this. But notice this, verse 10, Ezra chapter 7 and verse 10, because this speaks to not only what Ezra was sent to do, but what Ezra wanted to do, what his passion was. It says there in verse 10, "For Ezra had prepared his heart to seek the law of the Lord and to do it, to teach statutes and ordinances in Israel." He prepared his heart to do this. This is what Ezra was being sent back for. Ezra was being sent back to Artaxerxes to make sure that the law and the customs of the Jewish people was in order. They were doing what was right, and this was going to help the entire nation. Artaxerxes knew this, but Ezra, he had his godly motives. It wasn't just about law and order and structure. It wasn't just about those things. It was about being right before God, and Ezra, he knew this, and so when he is sent on this decree, he puts it in his heart. He prepares his heart to seek the law of the Lord, and I hope that that's something that all of us are doing as we are preparing our heart to seek after God. We pick up there in verses 11 through 26, and we're going to see that Ezra, his return is to check on Jerusalem. You see that in verses 13 to 14, the decree that is given there by Artaxerxes of what Ezra is to be doing. The people in the captivity, as we see there in verse 13 of Ezra chapter 7, the people that are here in this captivity, it says, "I issue a decree that all those, the people of Israel and the priests and the Levites in my realm who volunteer to go up to Jerusalem may go with you." He's telling them these people are free to go. If they want to volunteer to go and to serve, they can go, and they're free to return with you. This is a great return that happens to the people. Still, it's not enough people, but it's still a good number of people that are going to travel back. Now notice this. Go to verse 16, and you go down there, and once again, another leader, another ruler, Cyrus did it, Darius did it, now Artaxerxes is doing it. Gold, silver, any free will offerings, so many offerings are given to this group that is headed back so that they can adorn the temple of God and to make it just that much more beautiful. You see those provisions are offered so that sacrifices can be offered in verses 21 through verse 23. And so, once again, Artaxerxes is making sure that this work is going to be fully capable of succeeding in every fashion. And to even aid that, taxes. Taxes, see in verse 24, were not to be paid by those servants of the house of God, and those that were helping in that way. Now, wouldn't we love that? That if we had a specific job, we'd say, okay, no taxes. That would be great. But we pay taxes, so that's just what we do. But here, this is just part of this, how serious this was for Artaxerxes, but really how serious this was for Ezra. There's really two different mindsets here that are going back in this restoration. Once again, Darius said that anybody who stands in your way in the rebuilding of this temple can be put to death. In fact, he said that, basically a beam can be taken from their house and they can be strung up and hung to their death. The same type of language is used. We look in verse 26 here from Artaxerxes, and it says, "Whoever will not observe the law of your God, the law of the king, let judgment be executed speedily on him, whether it be death or banishment or confiscation of goods or imprisonment." They can be killed. It does. Yes, going back to verse 23, Mr. Bob points out a good thing. It says, "Whatever is commanded by the God of heaven, let it be diligently done for the house of God of heaven. For why should there be..." Yes, with zeal. Yes. Which version are you using? New American Standard says with zeal. New King James says diligently. And so diligently done for the house of God of heaven. For why should there be a wrath against the realm of the king and his sons? It's the same attitude that Darius had, really the same attitude Cyrus has had. They're trying to appeal to this God. They're trying to, make this worship happen so that their nation can succeed, so that their nation can grow. And he goes on down. He's so serious about this. He says, death, loss of property, banishment, any of these things can happen, or even imprisonment can happen if they break the law. And so this is really important. Ezra is tasked with a very important task, and we need to notice that. Now, notice this. Ezra is going to make sure that his focus is on the right kinds of things. And so we're going to verse 27 of chapter 7, and it says, "Blessed be the Lord God of our fathers, who has put such a thing as this in the king's heart, to beautify the house of the Lord, which is in Jerusalem, and has extended mercy to me before the king and his counselors, and before all the king's mighty princes. So I was encouraged as the hand of the Lord my God was upon me, and I gathered leading men of Israel to go up with me." Ezra knew who was in control of the situation. He knew who was leading this return back. He knew that Artaxerxes might have been an instrument that was being used, but that God was truly in control. He knew that, and he praised God for that. And he recognized, God's handiwork. He recognizes, the decoration that is going to be there for this wonderful temple. He recognizes the Lord's mercy. And so he begins there in verse 28, together, men together. Now we're going to notice, we're not going to read all these names because I'm terrible reading these names. But in Ezra chapter 8, verses 1 through 14, it's really an important section. I encourage you in your own time to take the time to read through these names, just kind of getting the idea of what's going on here. But if you read through and you just count the number of the men that says they took with them, they were going to be, there's approximately 1,500 plus. I mean, this is a lot of men that are going to be going back with Ezra in just chapter 8, verses 1 through 14. There are other servants that are to be called on later to serve in the temple. But just notice that even still, we talk about the return of Zerubbabel and the return of Ezra. You had approximately 50,000 roughly that came back with Zerubbabel, and now another 1,500 plus came back here. It's still not the number of people that could have come back. Ezra is actually he's going to run into a problem as he begins his journey back, and we're going to see that in the coming chapter. But notice this. Going on to verse 15, in 15 through 30. Ezra's going to gather the people by the river that flows to Ahava. This is in verse 15. But notice what he's not going to find. As you look down there, and starting in verse 15, it says, "So I gathered them by the river that flows to Ahava, and we camped there 3 days. And I looked among the people and the priests, and found none of the sons of Levi there." And so he's looking, and he's not finding these people that he expects to be there, people that they needed for the service of the Lord, for the service of the temple. And so he's going to call his leaders together. He's going to call these leaders together. He's going to send servants out to gather servants for the house of the Lord. And you're going to see an additional approximately 258 different servants are going to be called in and gathered up for the service of the Lord. But notice this, that within these verses, in verses 15 to 30, there's going to be fasting and prayers. Here's a time that they're preparing for a journey, and yet they're going to take the time to fast, to have themselves focused on God, focused on their task, on giving them full reliance over to Him, and taking that their own ability to control things. They're giving control over to God in this moment. They're fasting. They're praying. What are they praying for? They're praying for deliverance. Now, when you read through here, you might say, Ezra is just proud. He doesn't want to ask for help. He sounds like a typical man, not wanting to ask for directions to anywhere, not wanting to ask anybody to come help him. That's what Ezra, you could say, sounds like. Or you could say Ezra believes in God. And Ezra believes that God will direct him and God will keep him safe. And he knows not only does he not want to ask for these men to come and help, he does not need them to come and help because he knows he's going to take care of them. And so here you have these fasting and prayers are going to go for a safe deliverance, a 4-month journey on the road where there's walking, maybe riding with certain animals, but there's a lot of walking. You're vulnerable. You're exposed to whoever's coming. Maybe you're not familiar with the area. Maybe some of them were, but a lot of them, 70 years in captivity, some of these would have never made this trip before. And so here you have, you are vulnerable. And some people say, well, a large group, your safety in numbers. Yes, that is true in some senses. A large number of people also are very easily to spot and hard to hide. And so there's also some downsides to having a large group, a large company that you're traveling back with. And so it could have been a very dangerous and treacherous journey back for them, but they're going to pray for safe deliverance. And we notice as we go down to verses 26 and 27, we're going to notice that the gifts and the gold were separated out to the leaders of the priests by weight. They're going to be given a certain amount to carry. Each one of them is going to be delivered out to these leaders. It says, I weighed into their hand 650 talents of silver, silver articles weighing 100 talents, 100 talents of gold, 20 gold basins worth 1,000 drachmas, and 2 vessels of fine polished bronze, precious as gold. This is a fantastic, amount of precious items that are being weighed evenly among those. And this journey is going to begin with a great task in mind, a great task ahead of them. And that task is to restore that worship, restore that law there to the house of the Lord. And so, going on to chapter 8, verse 31 through 36, as you look here within this chapter, it says, Then we departed from the river of Ahava on the 12th day of the first month to go to Jerusalem, and the hand of our God was upon us, and he delivered us from the hand of the enemy and from ambush along the road. So we came to Jerusalem and stayed there 3 days. So we see there that the 12th day of the first month, they began to travel. We already know that it was months later before they arrived. When they arrived, they stayed 3 days, and then on the 4th day, they went to the temple to deliver the gold and the other articles to the temple. Sacrifices were offered in verses 31 through 36. Sacrifices were offered to praise the Lord, and Ezra and the people not only offered these sacrifices, but they began to give out the orders and instructions that they were tasked to do, and they delivered these orders for the rulers in the area as well as for the priests and for those ruling there. And so Ezra and his company quickly got to work, and that is what we all should do for the Lord. Now, we only have about 10 minutes left. We got to cover 2 chapters, and so we're going to try to do this very quickly. Ezra chapter 9 and chapter 10 really tie together very well. And I didn't elaborate too much on these last couple of slides. I figured we were going to struggle with some time issues here. But the Israelites had intermarried not just with Canaanite nations, with a lot of nations, with a variety of nations. They had intermarried, and this was a problem. The children of Israel were not to do this. They had done so anyway, and in fact, in previous generations gone by, these were the exact problems that had caused them problems to begin with. When the children of Israel went into the promised land, they were told to wipe the people out. They didn't do that. Joshua was a great leader, but they did not wipe out these people like they were supposed to. It corrupted their families, it corrupted their homes, it corrupted their nation, and because of this corruption, it led for decades, for centuries on end, it led them down a path that they did not want to go, to the point that they found themselves in captivity, in Assyrian captivity in 722, and Babylonian captivity between 606 to 536. They were in captivity because of their sins, and a lot of that had to do with their failure to wipe those nations out that God had told them to do, and the intermarrying that they did amongst the heathen nations of those lands. It corrupted them in more ways than one, and so here they were. Ezra's coming back. He's supposed to be a man about law, about order, about getting things back, and what does he find? He finds a nation that is lying to themselves and to God, that is trying to look holy, but at the same time, there's sin in their camp. There's sin in their camp, as we talked about, there after with Achan and others, there was sin in the camp, and they needed to deal with it. And so here's Ezra in chapter 9, and we're mostly just paraphrasing these chapters, but here within this, Ezra is so upset that he is tearing his clothes. I don't have hair, but he's pulling out his hair. Do what? That's right. It is. 6 through 9 is confession. And so, I mean, he is literally, it says, he grabs hold of his beard. He is so just in mourning over this sin. You know, we think about, blessed are they that mourn. Here he is. He's mourning. He's mourning over this sin that is in the camp, the sin that is in the people. And so here is Ezra, and he's distraught with the sin of the people. And so what you see within this chapter is that Ezra, he's basically just going to beg. He's going to plead. He's going to pray. He's going to, just agonize. And he's going to pray about admitting the guilt of the people. This included all the people. This was leaders, everybody on down. That the people as a whole were guilty of this great sin. But as you continue moving through this chapter, and you come that the people are going to see his remorse and his attitude and his showing of true repentance and mourning and concern over sin, and they're going to see that, and that's going to inspire them, not only to inspire them to encourage him and to lift him back up, but it's going to inspire them to do what they need to do. Now, it's going to take a lot of effort. So there in verses 1 through 17, the people there, they recognize their sin there before God, and they tell Ezra, we'll do what it takes. We'll make an oath. And so he makes them swear that oath that they're going to separate from their spouses, and notice this, even their offspring from those specific spouses. That is that's a hard thing to do, but yet it was necessary. Mr. Bob, do you have a comment? Right. Children, All were there. That's exactly right. Everybody was there. And so all the people were commanded to gather in 3 days. If they did not gather, their land and property would take them away, and they would be, banished. And so they met on the 20th day of the 9th month. Now, here was the problem. There's a lot of people that had a sin problem. It was not an issue that was going to take one night to fix and to get it all taken care of. And in fact, they were going to end up placing these rulers in charge of handling the ruling of the people and making sure that this was taken care of very promptly and very quickly. And it took approximately 3 months for this matter of intermarriage to be ruled on by the leaders that were there in the land. And so in Ezra chapter 10 and verses 18 through 44, we see that there were so many people that had intermarried. That included the priest, that included the Levites, and many other of these leaders. They were just as guilty, and this impacted their entire families. I don't know if you can even imagine, they're having to make this choice of a child that was yours, but a child was yours in this pagan relationship that had to be a very difficult personal decision, but it was a decision that God was asking, that God through his prophet, through his spokesman there, was leading them towards. Now, this book of Ezra teaches us a lot. It teaches us a lot about getting back to work, getting back into worship, focusing in on the law, making sure that the law is our focal point. God's commands is what we're all about. I think the book of Ezra can teach us a lot about our Christian life, about what we need to do. Maybe we've been living a life in exile because we've walked away from God. And you might think, well, I'm here every week. I attend every service. I'm in every Bible class. I even come on Wednesday nights. I'm here. But are we really in fellowship with God? Are we really walking with him? Or are we like the people that have put more focus on building our own houses, put more focus on the outside distractions that are out there? We've allowed them to get in our way. We've put so much focus on doing what we want to do versus what we know we need to do, and therefore we have allowed the world to influence us instead of us influence the world. The book of Ezra can teach us a lot about how we are to live, and we only cover this in a very brief survey. And so I hope and I pray that you will dive deeper into this great book, this small book, but dive deep into this and see how the life of these people, of Zerubbabel, of Jeshua, of Ezra, and even later on coming in the next week in Nehemiah, and how they can show us what we need to do to make sure our lives are pleasing before God. As we said, next week we will be in the book of Nehemiah. We will do 2 weeks on Nehemiah, I believe, at least maybe more, depending on how fast we go through it. It's going to be more of a survey. Mr. Gary will kick us off next week with Nehemiah, and then we will go from there. Thank you all for being here.